Hello, you're watching Rock Paper Shotgun, and today the emphasis is very much on the word shotgun. I mean, how could it not be? We're playing a game by id Software, a company that made its entire reputation evaporating bad guys with virtual shot. And Rage 2 Shotgun is an absolute beaut, especially when you combine it with your hero's overdrive power. Enter this supercharged mode, and it only takes one squeeze of the trigger to replace any problem with a very fine red mist. Never change it, never change. Of course, if the guns are pure id, the meat of Rage 2 is handled by Avalanche. They're the Swedish studio behind the open worlds of Just Cause and Mad Max. On paper, the marriage is kind of brilliant. You take the masters of interior first-person shooters and partner them up with a team that really understands the fun of the great outdoors. They even give you a gyrocopter. Who needs the grappling hook and windsuit of Rico Rodriguez when you can just enjoy the skies from the comfort of a chair? It's the lazy man's answer to flight. As much as I liked the original Rage, going from A to B was always the least interesting bit. So today I'm going to look at how by teaming up with Avalanche, id have found an interesting balance of freedom and intensity. I'll talk through the stuff I loved and a few bits I'm not so sure about. Annoyingly, this is mostly game capture supplied by Bethesda, so there's lots of new stuff we can't show you, but I'll try and tell you about it anyway. At this point I would normally ask you to like and subscribe, but in the future world of Rage 2, popularity is dictated by your ability to kill mutants in stylish ways. So even though I'm not playing, if you find the kills in this video suitably gnarly, maybe consider hitting that thumbs up. Otherwise, onwards with the video. So my big concern going into Rage 2 is that shifting development team, and more importantly shifting away from the id Tech engine, would lose that silky game feel that you expect from the House of Doom. Just Cause 4 was just not a good advert for Avalanche's Apex engine. It ran like an absolute pig on my PC. Thankfully, as soon as Rage 2 dumped me into Mutant Bash TV, any worries I had vanished.
Your journey to stardom shall commence.
Mutant Bash is a reality TV show that feels like Thunderdome if it maybe ate a little bit too much cake and ice cream. As mutants run at you from every angle, you'd think you were playing weird DLC for 2016's Doom. This is a fast and graceful shooter as you spin on the spot to pop an attacker before bashing another mutant into a giant pendulum or spinning buzzsaws. If I was in charge of this reality TV show, I'd rename it Shove Island, because so many mutants get pushed into spiky things. But it's that kind of high pressure arena shooting you only really see when id are involved. Movement is key, with ankle biting muties and fireball throwing freaks keeping you on the move. Your character, Walker, has a range of force-like powers that even the playing field, more on them in a second, but the charge time is just long enough to keep you looking for safe ground. Oh, and it all ends with a massive brute you have to empty rockets into. I mean, it doesn't get much more id than that. Of course, it's easier to mimic the feel of a classic FPS in the confines of a TV studio. I was equally impressed to see how tight Rage 2's shooting is in the outside world. When you look across the map, you'll see enemy outposts and various map markers that'll make you think you're in a Far Cry or Just Cause. You know, those repetitive encounters that serve up the FPS equivalent of baby food. But when you reach the markers in Rage 2, they are actually every bit as honed and crafted as Doom's arena combat. Sometimes they are quite self-contained spaces. You enter this still town stronghold via a lift, all seamless without loading screens of course. Other locations are plonked out in the open. Think of petrol stations or junkyards. Either way, they all feel like very curated action encounters, rather than some guards spawning in a random part of the map, which is what you get in so many open world action games these days. These fights are frantic playgrounds, with lots of mixed verticality for climbing up high and thumping to the floor with a ground slam. The speed of mantling scenery and the inclusion of a quick dash move, which is very similar to the thruster pack dodge in Halo 5 if you've played that, gives every fight a sense of momentum and forward thrust. The big problem I tend to have with open world action games is that they either turn into humdrum cover shooters or opt for grand chaos where you just fly around raining death. like in Just Cause. Rage 2 is quite refreshing in that it comfortably sits in the middle ground. You have the power to mess around and experiment, but it's focused in on very specific combat challenges. It hasn't been left to some algorithm to randomly spawn a firefight and hope that it delivers some emergent magic. It's a very neat meeting of the two studios' design styles. Another way the game balances the intensity of an id shooter and the more experimental sandbox style of Avalanche is in new powers that you inject into your hero. On first appearance, there's nothing here you haven't seen before. Shatter is, well, let's not beat around the bush, it's a Star Wars Force push. Of course, it's a Star Wars Force push in a game that doesn't have to worry about getting a PG rating, so this one can splat people against walls or chuck them screaming into the abyss. Then there's Slam, which is a ground pound and an excellent way of entering a room. The higher you are when you launch the move, the more vicious the crunch at the bottom. It's like Kirby's down attack in Smash Brothers, if Kirby could compact people into a gore puddle, which I don't think he can. Slightly spicier is the vortex grenade, which sucks in enemies and then propels them into the air where they hang for a second, opening them up for vicious combos. Whether this means whacking them with a wing stick or knocking them for a home run with a gravity gun, it's kind of up to you. Then you have the bulletproof barrier, which is not very exciting to talk about unless you combine it with a vortex grenade, which pulls goons through the barrier and liquefies them on entry. Delicious! Combining powers is really where the nanotrites come to life. You can use a vortex grenade to launch yourself into the sky and set up an even deadlier slam. Elsewhere in the demo we see the gravity gun. This fills enemies with tags that can then be attracted to another surface with the alternative fire mode. It works a lot like Just Cause's tethers and allows for you to combine heads and explosive barrels at incredible speeds. I was going to write a large part of this feature about all the wonderful guns, but the footage we have doesn't show all the ones I wanted to talk about. Whoever was capturing it really likes this alternative fire mode that pushes enemies violently into hard objects. So let's enjoy a few seconds of this, set to inappropriate classical music in slow motion. Right, no more of that. Onwards. Did you know that Rage is meant to be short for garage? I wonder if that means the game is technically called Rage 2. Either way, it's meant to reflect the fact that this is a shooter with cars. But how important are those cars? You see, after the creative chaos of gun combat, vehicles feel a little undercooked by comparison. For starters, you're switching all those exotic weapons for a minigun and rocket launcher. That's what Walker's basic car had equipped in the demo. Combat is basically a case of holding down fire until the other car's health bar decreases, which just isn't very fun. Part of our demo also had us take part in the Chaz Car Derby. Just as we had to prove our celebrity in Mutant Bash TV, this is a race to the finish line where full body contact is hardly frowned upon. But I found the direct car-to-car combat very disappointing. You can bump and shunt each other with turbo boosts, but it feels quite hit and miss as to when you'll land a killer blow, and the cars tend to steer like trucks. It would have been good if Avalanche had somehow tried to translate some of the energy of the on-foot combat into these car tussles. There is a ramming move, but it tended to spin cars out rather than tear them to pieces. I want a car that is as good at eating through other cars as Walker is at fighting goons. I want it to handle like Burnout 3, giving us endless masses of twisted metal. It's just a bit too polite as it currently is. To be fair, we were only playing with Walker's basic car. You are able to upgrade his or her vehicle as the game goes on. One of the best things in Mad Max was transforming the magnum opus from an old banger to total death machine, so I hope it can be done here. One thing I did really like, and again this isn't in the footage, is the ability to honk at trader vans to get them to pull over and open up shop. Quite a nice way of shopping for upgrades without having to return to built up areas. If you played the original, then you'll remember that the cars were more about getting you between shooting galleries than offering proper open world exploration or fun. If you want to, Rage 2 can still be played in a pretty guided manner. When you're following the core story, it plays like a corridor shooter with car bits in between. This opening mission took me from a fight in the mayor's office to infiltrating a nightclub by becoming a local celebrity, something I achieved by taking part in Mutant Bash TV and Chaz Cars. Of course, my plan went horribly wrong and I ended up fighting a giant monster in the club's basement. A giant monster, I should add, who looks just like the guy who runs the club. What kind of idiot creates a monster that looks just like himself? I mean, who wants to see bullets going into their own face? It makes no sense. But anyway, the point is, in these story missions, the game is really close to the original Rage. It's a very linear corridor shooter, but made with the input of the best corridor architects in the world. What's more interesting is how Avalanche tried to open up the game across the huge map and give you more to discover and do. At the heart of this is an upgrade system that revolves around proving loyalty to 3 leaders across the map. Different leaders respond to different actions. Liberating outposts will earn you favour with one, while collecting fuel from besieged petrol stations will please another. It's basically a way to tie all the little distractions across the map into 3 larger upgrade paths. Working with the mayor will help you unlock new features for your wing stick, for example. None of it is rocket science, well, apart from the guy who upgrades your rocket launcher, who is a literal rocket scientist, but it gives your trips out and about a bit more focus. You'll also find these arcs which hide nanotrite upgrades. To gain entry, you need to kill all nearby enemies, but you get that juicy new power as a reward. Of course, as you go deeper into the map, which is much bigger than the original and contains multiple biome types to prevent desert fatigue, you'll encounter high-level authority forces who can rain down death from missile launchers and basically make life misery until you return with better kit. All of this would be so much easier to describe if we'd been given footage of it in action. Of course, in our demo we were against the clock to find some interesting story bits and pieces, so it's hard to say exactly how much there is in the world to keep you busy outside of those missions. We're promised that this time the game doesn't have a sudden ending that locks you out of free roam exploration, a big black mark against the original, but whether it has stuff worth discovering beyond the end credits is yet to be seen. Rage 2 also continues Rage 1's excellent character work. Okay, it was hardly Shakespeare, although Macbeth would have been way more fun if he murked Duncan with a wing stick. But the characters were vivid and grotesque in a way that made the world feel lived in, rather than trying desperately hard to make you fall in love with everyone. This fine work continues here, sometimes even with a familiar face. When you reach the town of Wellspring, it's run by Lusum Hagar, who was the character in the first game who taught you to throw a wing stick. She's still good with the weapon herself, but has swapped demolition for democracy, though she's not above asking you to do violent things in her name. Characters are well written and brought to life with big, broad performances. Talking to Desdemona Cold, who runs Mutant Bash TV, I'm reminded of the excellent motion capture work in the recent Wolfenstein games. Both those and Rage have a very similar style, these big performances that get up in your face so you can really appreciate all the little animated details and character quirks. It's only a little thing, but I'm glad Rage 2 is keeping that particular Rage tradition alive. And those are my preliminary thoughts on Rage 2. I had hoped to talk through some more specifics with my own gameplay, but those will have to follow in a later video. If you have any questions about what I played and saw, do ask them in the comments and I'll do my very best to answer them. If you're in the mood for even more post-apocalyptic fun, why not check out my recent previews of Far Cry New Dawn and Metro Exodus. Both are slightly different takes on the end of the world. Maybe we'll do a big comparison piece next week and see which is shaping up to be the best of the best. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and I'd love it if you'd subscribe to Rock Paper Shotgun for more of this kind of thing. We cover everything from the biggest PC releases of the year to weirder indie fare. Thanks for watching, and we'll hopefully see you soon. Bye for now.